I promise that I'm sober. I'm just feeling very deeply today. Okay, well, it looks like we're having a guest. Do you want to be in the video? Okay, well, I guess not. Maybe in one of these videos I'll have enough energy to put on makeup again, but until then, you're getting this. How are you? I'm well, thank you for asking. I've been experiencing a lot of peace lately, and so that is something that is relatively new as of late. I feel like January and February, like me being an astrologer, I was very aware of like how significant those months would be in terms of like just there were so many squares going on and it was very astrologically intense, so I kind of knew that it would be a lot, but it was a lot. It was a lot, but I'm currently filming this on the 2nd day of March and I'm feeling a sense of peace that I have not felt in a very long time, and I wanted to come on here and talk a little bit about it. So before I even get started, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jasmine Kylene. I'm a spiritual counselor, conscious media journalist, girl doing her best, exploring the universe, all of the things. And for those of you who may not know, my first like love is writing, and so sometimes I like do articles for different, outlets. And so one article that I've been working on for an outlet that I'm super excited about was based on unconditional presence. And the reason why I felt called to write about it was because it is kind of what has saved me recently. I have really dived. I've embarked on this journey that has really reconnected me to what stillness and presence means for me, and it has reintroduced me to joy in a way that I haven't met joy sustainably in a while. So I kind of wanted to read some of what I wrote in hopes that it could to some degree resonate with you. This is different than like my typical videos. I usually do like how-to videos and like how to get your shit together spiritually, but this is just kind of like I wrote something and maybe you see yourself in it. I don't know. I'm not gonna read it like word for word because this isn't like spoken word. I'm gonna kind of, I guess, read like some different excerpts from what I wrote because I can't really read like the whole thing because it'll like be published at a point. And then within that I'll kind of break down what I mean by it and just, I don't know, share my soul, really. It's Pisces season. There's no structure to anything. I'm just kind of like expressing, okay? All you have to do is nothing. That is the first sentence that I wrote, and I think that that's really important because the premise of what I've discovered recently is that we place so much conditioning on allowing ourselves to be valued. And if you've seen the hit movie Soul, you will be familiar with the concept that sometimes our purpose, though grandiose and joy-inducing, sometimes it isn't necessarily what we're doing or the certification or the title that comes along with it, but rather simply the existence in our skin and the moment that we have right here, right now. So yeah, all you have to do is nothing. I feel like that's the answer to life's most perplexing question that is a rudimentary concept yet seemingly unattainable. We anger with peace for constantly abandoning us, but truthfully it's difficult to accept the fact that it could be our very own conditioning holding us back from maintaining the peace that always seems to be so fleeting. Finding the longevity and joy and anchoring serenity in soil that is rich enough to last is by presence, by committing to presence. And the reason why I believe this is because no matter what part of the world that you're in, it's safe to assume that you are a functioning member of like a ready, set, go culture. I feel like we've just been conditioned in more degrees than one, whether it's like on a government level, but also just like societally and culturally. We have just been taught that our value is a product of what we output, and that as long as we are doing, we are existing. And if we're not doing, we're not existing, we're not aiding or feeding this like machine, and therefore we are like worthless. I feel like we tie very much our experience of joy towards our accomplishment and attainment and achievement and advancement. And thus we condition our joy. We see it as transactional. I complete a task, I have permission to appreciate my life. I check off a goal, I have permission to value myself. This belief isn't fundamentally ours, but it's made us obsessive overthinkers, fixated on where we're going so intensely that we don't even take a moment to zoom out and see our current surroundings or to quiet the noise enough to ask ourselves if we even want to go to where we're rushing towards. And that's very important. Sometimes we can be very uncomfortable with... Did you see her? You didn't see her. Sometimes we can be uncomfortable with presence and with stillness because it limits distraction, and when we're not distracted, we hear ourselves and we experience ourselves fully and intensely and completely, and that means experiencing the parts of our minds that maybe aren't satisfied with life and that are honest in the fact that a lot of the happiness we are attached to is illusion. Which is crazy and dark, and sorry, I'm just like kind of babbling on, but like this is kind of like the deconstruction of my mind as of recent. But I mean, this way of existing has been embedded in us since adolescence. I feel like, you know, when we're in elementary school, we're thinking about middle school, and when we're in middle school, we're thinking about high school, and when we're in high school, we're thinking about college, and then, you know, joining the workforce and having, you know, a stable job and raising a family, and then retirement, and like whatever achievement is next on the list so that we can like get a badge that says we did it, we lived, we are allowed to be valued now. These man-made markers in life tell us when we're allowed to celebrate, and consequently they blur the moments in between as transitional. Life was always meant to be a leisurely stroll, and we've made it into like a relay race. And that makes sense because we've been conditioned to feed our egos more than our souls, and our egos thrive off of praise, whether it's external or internal. You know, we don't watch people, you know, be awarded for you know, like the person who remembered the most birthdays, or like the most appreciative of colors and sounds and sensations. Like, no, we watch people be awarded for being the best of the best in their work, and that makes us salivate for that kind of honor in our own realities, which ties us to this idea that like being the best and advancement and achievement is directly, you know, like it's equated to joy and to praise and to value and worth. And it's like, girl, or you could just sit your ass down and eat some almonds, look around, take in your settings, and know that like in that moment you are just as valuable, just as powerful, and you have the same access to the amount of joy that an Oscar winner on stage accepting an award does, you know? Oop, it's 333, y'all. She's saying it. She's talking that talk. Ooh. Being here is our superpower, yet so much of our collective disdain stems from our inability to stay within the present moment. As visionaries and as daydreamers, it's second nature to stray from where our physical body is and to let our minds wander to places that, quite frankly, don't exist. And that typically includes the past, though it is electric in our emotional currents, exists in our memories, and that typically also has to do with the future, because, you know, even though it serves as like the driving force of what we're walking towards and it dictates the choices that we make now, at the end of the day it exists in our imagination, and all that we actually physically have, all that is attainable and tangible and real, is like right now, this moment, you, me, this camera, this moment. Our life experience is directly reflective of our choices, and when we choose to live for our future, we are also actively making the choice to not exist in our now. And I think that is what binds us to anxiety and fear and doubt, because when we are constantly fixated on like where we will be and how we will feel when we achieve that thing or get to that place or become that person or have that relationship, we are disconnected from the reality that we're actually in, which was a future we longed for in the past. It's like this constant cycle of wanting to be elsewhere so much that once you get there, you realize you didn't even fucking live life. You weren't alive. There's no memories to fall back on. There's no sensations to feel because they were numbed by this idea that I'm not where I want to be, and therefore I'm choosing to disconnect and dissociate. And when we're so chained to where we will eventually be, we bind ourselves to like attachment to outcome. And then when things unfold, most likely in a way that's differently to the way that we envision it, we start to demonize our reality and get hard on ourselves and question things bigger than ourselves, when in reality, when we are present, we subscribe to the belief that all is unfolding exactly as it's meant to, and we release that control and we surrender to what is, and it just brings you such an amount of peace. It's like actually priceless. And then, you know, when we're anchored and just chained to our past, and we're constantly, you know, reworking scenarios in our head and thinking about what could have been and what should have been and how I could have done better or done differently, or a mistake that I made, we're not allowing ourselves to zoom out enough to have an aerial perspective where we can understand the way that everything played out and how that fed into you landing exactly where you need to be, or detouring on a route that took you away from something that was going to dig you into a much deeper hole. It's just really important that, you know, alongside presence, we subscribe to the belief that everything is playing out exactly as it's meant to. The mistakes are lessons interwoven into our actions, and that no matter how you get there, you always end up exactly where you are meant to be. And where I'm meant to be is cross-legged on this bed, talking about my mind and heart and soul to you and whatever part of the world, wherever you're watching this from, and know that we are parallel experiencing this life and all of the trenches and all of the triumphs and every part of this experience that it comes with. But at the end of the day, we're doing exactly what we're meant to be doing, which is our best. And it is within presence that we have our eureka moments and our life-altering revelations, when we are divinely led instead of societally controlled, when we're able to absorb the timeline we're in and feel genuine gratitude for it. In stillness, all of the ego-driven desires that normally drown our minds, like what could have been or how will I get there, suddenly don't have center stage, and presence empowers us by gifting us enough silence to finally hear ourselves. I think sometimes we can get so attached to what we desire for our lives, or rather what we've been conditioned to think we desire for our lives, that when we actually do begin to practice and implement presence into our lives, we kind of meet ourselves again. We're reborn with this sense of like, oh, maybe I don't value myself by my work ethic or how much I create, and maybe, I don't know, maybe I like to move a bit more slowly. Maybe I want a slower life. Maybe it's the chasing of accomplishment and material that's been depressing me, instead of this idea that I've been failing at it and that's what's depressing me. Like, maybe it's just the chase itself instead of your performance. And I think, I don't know, it's to some degree radical, but I think that subscribing to presence is a way to challenge the matrix, and it's a way to challenge capitalism. Like, I know I get it, I'm like an Aquarius, so I'm very like contrarian, but I think that the only way to dismantle and undo all of the damage done to us, like media-wise and societally, is by taking our power back and saying, I am not going to value myself and my worth by gaining and feeding this machine you've stuck me in. I am actually going to slow my life down and listen to my heart and follow what my soul defines as success and what my soul defines as joy, rather than what I've been told or taught or conditioned to believe it is. And within that, you know, if you really allow yourself to just quiet your mind, quiet your body, sit in some stillness, meditate, and ask yourself, how do I define joy? How do I define success? You will realize that to some degree abundance is an energy. It's something that you encompass and radiate and attract. It's not really a thing itself. And you will find that it has nothing to do with financial or material, you know? And yes, I don't want to sound like I am too off the rails, because I very, very much, I think that money, while I don't necessarily think that money can buy you happiness, I know that having financial comfort and like having the privilege of not having to worry about money can gift you a kind of peace that many people unfortunately don't know, because the system isn't wired to allow them to know that. However, I think that if it is what we are led by, it will feed our greed and it won't feed our joy, and we will always have an empty vessel. We will always have a void that we are constantly trying to fill with more of it, when in reality, I'll read you the last paragraph. The journey molds us just as deeply as the arrival. Hold a vision for yourself, believe it to be yours, walk your path accordingly. But in the meantime, unclench, take it all in, and know that the peace you're chasing will never be attained if you don't already bring it along with you. So with that being said, I feel like it's more of like, yes, Success in a capitalistic way isn't necessarily a bad thing, but if it is all that we are pouring our identity into, all that we are pouring our value into, it is inevitably going to leave us feeling empty. It's not going to be sustainable. We need to already arrive with peace, with a foundation of self, with a foundation of joy, with already seeing life as magical and not waiting for life to become magical. So chances are, if the matrix hasn't clouded your judgment irreversibly, then when you sit and you ask yourself, what to your core does success and joy look like? It's not based on financial gain or tangible goods. It isn't based on a job title or a certification. These are delicious sprinkles on top of a life that is rooted in exploration with soul family, adventures far from home and within our own backyards, laughter so deep that it's silent. I haven't laughed like that in so long. The first bite of food cooked with love and intention, the pure joy of a pet excited to see you when you come back home, the final page of a book so good you didn't realize how many hours went by, the brave moment in which you stood firm on a boundary, took a new route and made friends with a stranger, witnessed a sunset with too many colors to count, and fell asleep to the smell of incense and the sound of rain. That's what builds joy. That's what builds connection to life and seeing the magic in the mundane and having a really ethereal experience in this like universal incarnation you've embarked on. And it can only be experienced with presence. If we don't have our eyes open and our senses awakened enough to actually see it, we're missing it, and it's the whole point. It's literally the whole point. Everything else we've told ourselves we need. Everything else is structured and man-made. And peace won't be nearly as fleeting as it typically is, if we just allow ourselves to interweave it in every moment and see it in every color and every food and every flavor and every sensation. I think that compulsively thinking of the past and future or chaining yourself to the speed of attainment means your senses don't have the capacity to feel deeply, and at times we fear presence because it forces us to sit with ourselves, to feel entirely the good, the bad, and inevitably the ugly. It forces us to confront the darker parts of our minds, the shadow within and around, and the truth we've been blinding ourselves to behind a rose-colored lens, that maybe our happiness is an illusion. But it's that very quest for happiness that binds us so tightly to our own suffering. We run away from sitting still enough to greet our shadow selves because they shatter the illusion we've sheltered our lives under, the false narrative that we're always okay, we're always in control, our reality is perfect, and we're always the versions of ourselves that we choose the external to perceive. We'd rather feign joy bound by achievement and conditioning and glorify relationships that are pretty and surface, rather than risk experiencing solitude, sheer presence, and the looming threat of loneliness that it could introduce us to. This is not dark, but this is like a heavier part of the article. But it's important for me to share because I think that like chasing happiness is just as damning as chasing sadness. And I know I've talked a lot about happiness throughout this whole thing, and you know how in order to really find it we have to be present, but I think it's important to recognize that like a life that is truly joyful embraces the wide spectrum of emotion that makes being a human so special and so unique. And that spectrum of emotion, which includes, you know, sadness and grief and excitement and exuberance and curiosity and fear and all of that, you know, that's the genetic makeup of the human experience, and it molds us, it deepens us, it allows us to connect to each other and mirror each other in a way that just deepens our relationships and our capacity to heal each other, and just, I don't know, it gives us foundation for how we connect relationally. Because I think that if I was just like this one-dimensional being that only experienced a handful of emotions, how could you see yourself in me? How could I see myself in you? How could we develop something that has a real solid ground if I don't even have the capacity to understand where you've been and where you're going? Societally, when we're met with our shadow, we're conditioned to stifle it, to numb it, to pop a pill and count down the minutes until it's gone and we can be deemed productive again. But presence invites us to integrate it, to listen to it, to forgive it, to hug it, to validate it, and to thank it for letting you know that you had something to process. Through feeling our pain, we are met with our own resilience. Suffering introduces us to our depth, to our power, to our utter brilliance. And practicing presence means dancing with the discomfort, learning from it and growing with it, and accepting that while it should never steer the wheel, it will always have a seat within you. So I know I just said a lot, and it was probably not in any degree organized or structured, and to that I bid my apologies, but Venus is in Pisces and my natal Venus is in Pisces, so like I'm just operating from the heart here. And I guess the premise of that, in summation, if you made it this far in, thank you, is that challenge the beliefs that you've been conditioned to think are yours. Come back to presence, come back to earth, come back to now. And coming back to now means taking in the colors, moving slower, not thinking about your next task while you're completing one, being really present in your conversations, listening to listen and not listening to respond. It means being less digitally stimulated, right? And actually being stimulated by your environment and the colors and experiences around you. It means allowing where you know you are going and you are setting intention to go to be your guide, and allowing your past experiences to refer to when taking certain steps, but allowing them to be just that. What exists in your memories or in your imagination to just kind of stay there, because all we have is right now. All we have is what's physical, what is immediate, and what can only be felt in stillness. Meditate some more, write down how you are feeling, connect with people, talk with people, and just something that I really I think is so important to take away is to just not place conditioning on when you are allowed to congratulate yourself, when you are allowed to celebrate, when you are allowed to experience joy, when you gift yourself the permission to experience joy. You don't have to accomplish or become anything in order to say, okay, I guess I can have a party now. Like it's within the now, it's within the just embodiment of self. You don't need to earn a badge or become anything in order to be deserving of the enjoyment that honestly is your birthright. You are deserving and worthy right now, and your career and your accomplishments and all that you're going to create and inspire and impact with what you find your purpose to be, you know, that's all beautiful and that's all part of your story, that's part of your narrative, but it isn't your why. Your why is right now. Your why is when you go into the kitchen and you make yourself a cup of tea and you sit down and you watch some trash television with your family and you laugh and you joke and you fight and you cry. That is what it is. That's life. That is the most beautiful part of our human experience, and anything else is just gonna keep you chained to a cycle of like, yes, I did it. Okay, well, what's next? What can I do then? Okay, I'm gonna work so hard and get there and miss out on life until I get there, and then, oh my gosh, I'm there. Oh yeah, this feels great for literally 5 seconds. What's the next thing I can do? And then like, you're literally just stuck in this hamster wheel, and I found myself very deeply chained to it, and comparing myself to others and waiting until my moment, and how was I going to get this level of success, or I was maintaining relationships that my soul wasn't even satisfied by because of this idea that like, oh, but on surface it looks like, you know, I have this thing, I have this person, I have this relationship, so, you know, that's all that really matters. And it's like, girl, it'll bind you to overusing your yes and underusing your no. Yeah. So anyway, I hope that this served you. I will definitely share whenever the article is up if you want to read the whole thing. But otherwise, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram, on malialuna.tv for more conscious content. And yeah, thank you. I appreciate and love you, and I hope you're having an amazing life.